And we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Photo Mishmash. This one being broadcast live June 7th. No, June 6th, 2000. I got one job to do at the beginning of this show. One job. It's to get the date right. Welcome, everybody. Steve, welcome.
I would have screwed it up about months ago.
They either have to look each time, or it's like one in 4 times that I start the show, I know the date right off the bat. But this is that weekly show where we chit chat about well, I'll be honest with you. Steve, professional photographer and good friend of mine, joins me each week on the show, and really it's because I miss him between trips. That's the purpose of this show these days.
Yeah, it's fun. I look forward to this every week. I really do, for a number of reasons. It's fun to get on and just talk about what we talk about, and to review images and to give some Lightroom assistant tips. It's fun to catch up with you in between tours. I mean, because it is like a couple years now. We've been traveling together so much. So you come home and you're kind of like, where's my bro? Where's my buddy Toby? And of course, Renee gets tired of it. She's like, Toby.
Well, I heard Renee wasn't feeling so well, so I hope she's on the mend. And I sent her a couple of cute videos that I hope make her feel a little bit better.
Oh, that's good. She'll like that. She ran out and did some errands. She's feeling much better today.
Good.
So, yeah, she's definitely on the mend. Thank you.
That's good to hear. And Brian wants to know, chat room, welcome to you all as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this Wednesday afternoon. Brian wants to know if you won the lottery. Steve. I don't know what that's about. You want to share?
I know. It is pretty crazy, and it's funny that you notice that. Yeah, so the Jeep thing held my motorcycle. I bought a motorcycle a little over a year ago. I've grown up racing motocross, and I've had many bikes. Anyway, I wanted to update my Jeep for a long time. So sold the motorcycle. I just wasn't using it. Took some of the proceeds from that and did the Jeep thing, and then banked the rest. And then bought the Hassie. Yeah. And I won't go into all the details about that. That was an investment. That was a lot of time spent figuring out how that was going to get paid for, along with, future lenses. But I'll just say that, in my corporate days, I was fairly smart with some investments, and the stock market's been really good lately, and I'll just leave it there.
Nice. So give us a little bit more. You're a week in to owning this beaut of a camera. How much do you regret it?
How much do I regret it? Wait a second. Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
I don't regret it at all. I haven't had a chance to go out and shoot it as much as I'd like. It's just been a super busy week here, just a lot going on. But I did get out a couple nights ago, and the sunsets have been beautiful, and fired off a few shots, and I absolutely love the camera. So yeah, I'm super excited. The Arctic trip is coming up in a few weeks, and I'm going to put it to good use there, along with the long lens stuff. So I'm going to have to rent. For those of you that don't know, basically, I picked up this Hasselblad X1D. I know we've talked about it on last week's Mishmash, and then I did an unboxing video for the Pen members. But in doing so, part of the agreement was to give up all of my Canon gear to my wife, because she loves to shoot, and now she's got a whole arsenal of stuff. So I'm going to have to ask her if I can borrow some of that when we go to the Arctic trip, and we'll just see what she decides to charge me.
But I want a nice selfie with the Hasselblad of me. That's not really a selfie. I want a portrait of me with the beautiful walrus taken with the Hasselblad. So can we make that happen?
Yeah, we can make that happen. Sure.
All right. Yeah.
Because the thing is, if I'm confident, because if I miss that shot, then perhaps David McKay can get that shot. And if he misses that shot, then I know that Allie McKay will get that shot, because they have also invested in the same camera. Mm-hmm. So we're all kind of breaking them in on the Arctic trip. That's good. All but one of us.
Right. You get a big strap with a floaty thing, so just in case it goes overboard, you can get it back up out of the water.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
Okay. All right. So we'll have more information about that. That's really exciting. And also, Brian says, we all want Jeeps and Hasselblads. Now, the record, Brian, I would like and a Tesla. Just say.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is I've entered a really interesting stage of life. Like I've done photography for a big part of my life, but as a business for the last 5 years. And I never thought, even in the film days, I always wanted to shoot medium format, and I just never thought it was going to happen. And so I'm really excited about this whole new direction that I was able to invest in. And then the Jeep thing, this is like my 4th Jeep. I've had a CJ7 in college. I've had a bunch of Wranglers, and usually I end up modifying those out over time. So yeah, it's just I'm very I don't know, kind of goal oriented and brand loyal, and so there's a lot of years behind all the stuff that you guys are seeing.
I understand. Yep. All right. So this beginning of the show is where we chit chat a little bit and also talk about some stuff that content that has gone out on this channel that you may or may not have missed. Pen related, Allie put out a video on teeth whitening. And what I appreciate about that is it's not how to make the teeth like gleam like some ivory tower. It's to keep the natural look and tones of them while just removing some of the yellow. So that's a short and sweet tip, and something if you're photographing people often, you might want to take a look at. David put out the Tuesday tip. I've mentioned this before. If you're a Pen member, you get every single week a really helpful article in your inbox, and also gets posted to the Pen site. So if you're one of those people that never checks your email and you have 13,472 unread messages, like maybe me, that you still can go see these. And David is about zooming with your feet, looking beyond your subject, and really thinking about how you want to get those shots. And what else went out? Was my Hasselblad review out yet when we talked last week? I can't remember.
I think it hit the air that day, or almost like as we were talking. It was supposed to go out on Thursday, but it ended up going out last Wednesday.
Okay.
And I think, I can't remember if I watched it before Mishmash, but I would definitely encourage people to check that out. It doesn't paint the most favorable light on the camera. I think that's fair to say, but at the same time, it's fair. I didn't really disagree with anything that Toby said. It's, as we've talked about before, it's a very, very specific type of camera for certain type of shooting. And I think comparing it to a 35 millimeter equivalent is apples and oranges. But I'll be the first person to say that this is definitely not the type of camera for everybody, not by a long shot. So I love the review. I thought it was one of your best reviews, and the editing on it was awesome. And just the image stuff. Well, I mean, there were a few really nice images in there, but
the ones that said Steve Scourge on them. Thank you for helping out with that. Thank you. Yeah, I can only take a little bit of credit for the look of that video. Kaz, my video editor and videographer, he did a fantastic job. I'm really happy with how that came out too. Steve, we're getting reports of a little bit of echo when I think I'm talking through you. So if you've got headphones nearby,
let me try them and see if it improves.
Also, just yesterday, my review of the new Mindshift Gear Exposure 15 shoulder bag went out. And as I said, and maybe as you saw, I've now passed the 1,000 videos on YouTube mark, which is kind of a big milestone. That's a lot of videos. And I thought, I'll just try something different. And so my kids were over for the weekend a couple weekends ago, and we kind of collaborated as a family. Chris helped out a bunch, and then there's a bunch more that I needed to shoot after the kids left that Chris helped with. So it was a very collaborative effort. Even the dog helped out, Archer. Lana maybe a little bit. And it's a stop motion review. I'm really happy with it. People have been really positive about it and saying nice things. I'd love to follow it up with, how did it look behind the scenes? What did I create? If you watch to the very end, it switches from the actual view you see to the view of my video editor as it's playing, and gives you just a glimpse of what's going on behind the scenes. But I'd love to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So I'll do that at some point.
Okay. How are we sounding now? I've got headphones in, and I switched my mic to off of internal here. So hopefully it sounds better. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great, and I was hearing a little of that echo myself, and so I don't think so.
Okay.
And
Cool.
Film 317 says slow motion review next. That would be fun too. That's funny you asked that, because one of the things I'm kind of finishing up my review of the Mavic Air, and it can do 120 frames per second down at 720. So I've been doing a little bit of that, and I was like, what would a complete slow-mo review look like? What gear would it be? What would I be talking about? How would I do that? So I know you're kind of asking tongue-in-cheek, Film 317. I don't know exactly who you are, but yeah, that could be fun too. It's just fun to kind of play with this freedom that I have, and that's one of the things that I love about my job. So,
speaking of film, I didn't want to forget this.
oh yeah.
I wanted to give a quick shout out and thanks to Caleb, who is on. I see his name there. He sent me in the mail. I hope you guys can see this. This right here is film gold. This is 120 Acros, my favorite black and white film ever, and he sent a roll of that to me in the mail. So thank you, Caleb. I really appreciate that, along with a really nice note and some great recommendations on where to have it processed and have prints made. So he gave me very specific directions that every shot on that roll of film needs to be extremely intentional, which I tend to do with this stuff anyway. But being that they don't make this film anymore, I certainly will abide by that. So thanks a lot, Caleb. I just wanted to shout out and thank you for that. It means a lot.
That's awesome. Roy's put a note in here. Roy, thank you for putting together show notes as you do, that he's about to get sunburned. Steve will be missing you at this upcoming Joshua Tree. Roy is going to be filling in for you as one of the instructors. And Roy, it's an astrophotography workshop, so the sun is set, and I don't think you'll get sunburned. Just FYI. I just kidding. We will be out during the day sometimes, and it's going to be warm. But I mean, you're a Midwestern boy. You're used to that, right? I mean, it gets hot there in Michigan.
They have the sun in the Midwest?
Yeah, I think they got the sun there. I mean, like, pretty sure it comes up and goes back down.
I lived in Chicago for a while, and we saw it. We saw the sun like 2 months out of the year.
Is it really pretty cloudy there?
No, it was a little bit more than that. Maybe it was 2.5 months.
Yeah. It will be warm during the day, but last I checked, evening temperatures, night temperatures look lovely. And that's what it was like last time we were there. It was the most perfect temperature. There was no wind, and it was like 65 to 70 degrees at night. And so it was just really, really lovely, and crossing my fingers that it's going to be the same for this workshop as well. Speaking of that, I'm excited. I'm testing some gear. I got a ton of stuff on the table right now. One of the things that I want to talk about, we talk about photographing the stars, and it's challenging for cameras, but we don't need super duper gear. I mean, this is the Nikon D3400. It sells with lenses for under $400 right now. And I think this thing is going to do really well. I'm curious to see what it does with the kit lens, and then throw on my favorite little cheap $250 Rokinon 14mm f2.8 and see how it does. And then, well, because I'm curious, look what I got, Steve. Look, can you see that it's the 14?
It's the 14-1.8.
Yeah, I'm hiding the adapter because this is a Nikon. It won't need the adapter when it's on the D3400, but it will need that if I put it on my Sony.
They have an adapter for that?
What's that?
They have a Hasselblad adapter for that?
I'm not so sure.
With that massive lens, it's got to cover a medium format sensor.
Well,
that's my favorite star lens. I love that.
Yeah. It's a good lens. So I'm excited about that. Also, I mentioned this. Oh, here, let me just take it off here first. I'm excited to talk and share. I'm down here doing something appropriate. Don't worry. It's just taking this along too. I want to just talk to people about the differences of a $500 tripod head versus like $100 tripod head. And I'm also really excited because I've had this forever. I can't remember if I've seen it, I've shown it on the show or not, but obviously you need an appropriate tripod to put this on. And I'm bringing along this baby. Believe it or not, it fits in my suitcase.
Holy, okay, wait. Just for clarity's sake, is that the BH55 ball head?
It is the BH50. It is the BH55.
So I wish I had mine here right now. I've used that ball head for years. That was my real estate photography ball head. They've changed it just slightly. Mine's years old, but it's massive. It's huge. So that tripod is simply enormous.
Let me give you some stats about this tripod. It is a carbon fiber tripod that can support 150 pounds. So I have extended it to its full height. And when it's extended to its full height, it is above my head, the ball head. And then I can hang on it. And well, I'm a little heavier than 150 pounds, but it hasn't broke yet when I do that. So basically it's like a portable playground, and it fits in my suitcase.
I was going to say, how in the world are you going to transport that thing?
It'll fit in that larger suitcase that I have, I think. So I'm excited to bring that along. And when everybody's flashing their flashlights all over the place, my tripod's going to be up past all of the atmospheric disturbances and is going to get just amazing, clean star pictures.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah. We'll see. All right. And last thing that I want to mention is that if you want to learn hands-on Lightroom from me, there's a couple of spots left in each of the classes. It's kind of a West Coast tour. Later this month, I'll be here in Seattle doing an evening photo walk, followed by a Saturday all-day Lightroom class. And then in July, I'll be in Phoenix talking about hot temperatures. That'll be fun. And and that's a 2-day Lightroom class plus talking about making a photo book. So, I mean, so often we have all of these pictures. We print a couple now and then, but we look at a lot of them, put some on Instagram, but it's really quite easy to make a beautiful photo book. So I'll be showing that as well. If you know anybody in the Phoenix areas and you think I'm a decent teacher, send them along the link to photorec.tv/shop. And then at the end of October, I will be in Sacramento at the McKay Studio and Classroom Teaching Space, teaching a 2-day Lightroom immersion. So, and then Steve, you and I are looking at some dates in 2019. So stay tuned. Let us know. You know, we can't make any promises about where we are able to come, but certainly if we get a bunch of people that email us and say, please come to Scranton, Pennsylvania, then we could probably make that happen.
Yeah, it really is kind of demand driven. So in terms of where we go. So absolutely. I can't reiterate that enough. If there's a class that you want taught in a certain area, just let Toby know, let David know, let us know in Penn, whatever, just because we keep track of all of that. And then when we start to see these little hotspots develop in the country, we can say, okay, we've got obviously enough interest in this area. Let's go. Yep. And I'm really excited about that next year, doing more of those classes with you. I think, we've talked about possibly cutting back on some of the travel and that kind of stuff. We've got another instructor that's coming along, which we'll talk about more in the weeks ahead. And that's really exciting. And so to get an opportunity to teach more of those classes, I'm really looking forward to next year.
Nice. All right. Just to follow up real quick, Roger in chat asks if this tripod has a step ladder so I can get myself up to see through the viewfinder. It's got a little rope ladder. It just coils out and you climb up there.
Nice. No, it's got an elevator.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good idea. No, it's gonna be a little bit of an issue, but honestly, I think I will, if I get it all set up right, at a lowish elevation, and then just put in Wi-Fi, or maybe if I'm running a time lapse, just go ahead and get it all the way up there. How will I know for sure it's nice and level? And then it's up above everything and shooting a nice time lapse. That's my plan. Is that going to really work? No, it's not. All right. So we've wrapped up the week in review and mentioned the week ahead. As I said, just one mention, because I've been talking about it a bunch today online and with some folks, is the Arctic trip is coming up. Steve, you mentioned that. You mentioned that gear coming. That we leave at the end of June, just about 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. And that I'm really excited for that trip. That trip should be pretty epic. Okay. So we've talked in the past. We have a critique session in this show, but we've really kind of adjusted that to be less critique, more Lightroom tips, because as a pen member, if you're watching the show and you're a pen member, the amount of critique resources you have available to you is fantastic. Steve, you guys are preparing for this month's show right now where people submit their favorite best piece. And as a professional photographer, you, David, and Allie sit down and spend some time giving your opinion about that.
Yeah, I actually was selecting my top 5 a couple of hours ago. And I've looked at them periodically throughout the month as people submit, but I don't, typically I don't want to select my top 5 until we get all the submissions in. And so I started looking. I've come up with 4 for sure, and then I've got like 3 that are sitting in this maybe file, and I've got to figure that out. So that's kind of what we do. Is David comes up with his top 5, I come up with mine, Allie comes up with hers. And then we collaborate together and we discuss and we kind of fight for our own cause at times. And we select our own top 5. And it's based on a number of different principles. The 12 principles of a merit photograph from PPA is really what we use as a judging standard to help people out. And I think it's really valuable. We're going to record that tomorrow. So I've got to get on the ball tonight. I've got to figure out what my 5th photograph is going to be. And then we're going to discuss it in the morning and do a recording in the afternoon. So
nice.
Yeah, it's I look forward to that too. That's super helpful for the members, even if they're not participating. I've said this before. Even if you haven't submitted a photograph, watch the review. It's a little long. It's usually about an hour or so, but it's packed full of what Toby and I are about to do right now with some of these tips. And it is more of a critique, where what Toby and I are doing now is trying to just give some tips on where to go with certain photographs and how to use Lightroom and Photoshop for that.
Yep. And you can also post in the Facebook group and also on the forum if you're not a Facebook user or you want an alternative audience or just place to post. So lots of options there. That is all to say, I think we've given enough people options. We didn't get any images this week. So what I just want to do is take a few moments and answer. I know.
Serious?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I want to answer though. Brian, I think you're hanging out in the chat. You had this question. I think it was Paul also who followed up with a yes, or one of you followed the other. You are using Lightroom as we recommend and suggest, but you find yourself spending some time in Photoshop. It could be a little bit of time, could be a lot of time, and managing that kind of back and forth it doesn't seem as smooth as it could be. So I'm going to show my method for that. I think it's pretty simple. Steve, of course, you can chime in and add anything else that you want to about that. But first thing that I have to do, shoot, I forgot. I got to share my screen so you can see everything I'm doing. So here I am in Lightroom. And I'm in my exposure 15 bag review. Actually, you can see, so these are all of the images that I used in that stop motion review. So, if I come in here and I find something that I want to work on, let's just open this one right here. So I see this shot right now. And there's something about it that causes me to need to go to Photoshop. For me, I often go to Photoshop when I have to do, serious kind of cloning and repairing or removal of stuff. In this case, we've got, there's a speck on the floor. There's 2 over there as well. I could do that here in Lightroom. That would be fine. But down here, I've got the tripod legs and a little bit of shadow of them as well. And so if I wanted to leave this exactly as it is and remove those, I would go over to Photoshop. I also go to Photoshop if I'm sandwiching a couple of images together, and we can talk about that as well. Steve, what are some of the reasons that you go to Photoshop for?
Many of the same reasons. I basically save Photoshop for when I think an image, I've done everything to an image that I want to do in Lightroom, and I don't do any healing any patchwork, cloning, none of that stuff. I don't do any of that stuff in Lightroom. So I work on the exposure, I work on the composition, I work on the story, I work on the transformation, all that stuff I do in Lightroom. I do the colors and the white balance, all of that in Lightroom. And then once I've got what I consider to be a finished Lightroom photograph, I then pull it into Photoshop. And I've gotten to the point where I pretty much never share a picture without finishing it off in Photoshop. Even if I don't have to remove anything, I like to just fine tune it in Photoshop. So I do everything in Lightroom, take it into Photoshop, and there I'll do healing, lasso tool, you know, whatever, move some stuff around. And sometimes when I'm working there, I open up Camera Raw, which is basically the exact same thing as Lightroom. If I found that I want to make some tweaks to the white balance or the color exposure and that kind of stuff. And basically then I'm just in Photoshop and I do all my finishing there. I do virtual matting, all that stuff there. And then I always save the photograph, which kicks it back to Photoshop version.
Yep. So
I don't toggle back and forth at all unless I found that I missed something and I need to go back to the picture.
That sounds good. Okay, so I was just deciding if I should go find a more exciting picture, but this works fine for the example. So let's say I've made my changes here, as Steve said. You know, let's bring our exposure up a little bit, contrast up, highlights down, shadows. Let's double click whites, double click blacks. Oh, an interesting direction with blacks. So I like that. I say, hey, I'm done with what I do in Lightroom to this. I'm now ready to go do the Photoshop stuff to it. So I just right click on it and I go down to edit in Adobe Photoshop. It's the first option right here. Just a quick shout out for Nix. It is re-released today. $50 to the end of this month. If you like
I just downloaded a 30-day trial, but I haven't tried it yet.
Okay. I haven't tried it yet either. I'm on the fence about whether or not I'm going to, because honestly, I have used it very, very little in the past year.
That's why I did the trial instead of purchasing a whole new pack.
I mean, only $50. It's not bad. It definitely has some nice options. We can come back and talk about that in a little bit more detail soon. But for now, I'm just going to say, hey, edit in Photoshop. So this then opens Photoshop and opens your image in Photoshop. Should be. Shouldn't have to do anything else. Right click. Edit in. There we go. And so now this is where I could do my cloning and healing. I mean, you know, if I wanted these tripod legs to get out, this is going to be tricky, but let's see what it can do. If you're only working on the background layer, and that's usually what I do, you can just simply select your stuff. Let's do it one at a time and hit delete and OK. And it will do some content aware magic. It's a little funky down there, a little funky, but let's say it's good enough because that's not the purpose of that. And let's do that one, delete and enter. That one's pretty rough. Would somebody notice that if they were just looking at your image? Probably not, but you can always undo. I've got my history panel right here. But anyway, and let's just make some other kind of bigger change. Let's just draw a big X on here for a second, just as something very different. Now, I'm done. I've done everything that I need to this image. I just close it and hit save when this box pops up. And we call this round tripping. So there it is now. There's the original image. There's the new one in Photoshop in this recents list. But if you go to Lightroom, it should appear right next to your other one, and it'll now say 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. And depending on your preferences, let me bring this up because I feel like that little, I don't know if you guys can see this little window down here that's kind of hiding stuff. Depending on your preferences, you can see that it is now a TIFF file. I actually have, I was changed that a while ago. I like them to be PSDs personally. I don't think there's a real big difference in either way, but that's under Lightroom Preferences, External Editing, File Format. You can choose TIFF or PSD, and so it'll come back as that.
Lightroom default is TIFF.
Okay.
But I've I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I set it up, but I always do mine as PSD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And so it just says right here, 16-bit Pro Photo RGB is a recommended choice in Lightroom. PSD can be less efficient than TIFF with respect to metadata updates, but that's just, I like the PSD.
Yeah, and I use color space sRGB on everything.
Now, I know some of you, say, I have trouble when I come back to Lightroom. You followed what I just did, but you come back to Lightroom and you're like, where did it go? In older versions of Lightroom, I saw this issue from time to time. Let's say that you had carefully starred these images and then set a filter. So you were just working on your starred ones and you made changes to it. You did the round trip and then you didn't see it. Well, because you had filtered it out. It didn't pick up that star rating in older versions of Lightroom. I'm pretty sure that's true. In the newest version of Lightroom, whatever rating you had applied to the original, when it comes back to Lightroom, it picks that rating up and should be displayed as well. Mm-hmm. So the difference is, in this case, you get the little 2 of 2 icon. If you're doing something else, like making a panorama or merging to HDR, if you had 4 images or 5 images, it should appear at the end of them. There's a couple of rare cases where I've seen it appear at the very end of your list. So that's someplace else to check for it. It might depend on if you're in the library and if you're down here and you have your sorting turned on. Where is my sorting? I'm missing that. Sorting, sorry. Oops. Sorting. Right there. So you maybe you have this set for edit time or something else. And so that new one could see, now it goes to the very beginning, but it took both of them there. So it shouldn't happen anymore that you end up far away from the one that you return. And here's why I like this system. You know, I don't have to go think about the save as or the saves or anything like that. I simply say, hey, I'm using Lightroom to organize all of these pictures. You know, we can go to the grid. I go to Photoshop, I make my changes, and then I come back from Photoshop and it lives in Lightroom right next to the original. And then, of course, you could also come up here and you could say file type. In the future, you could say, hey, I need to find those files that I've gone. And if it was a PSD, it would be a PSD. If I go to my all photographs up here, there should be a file type that shows up that's a PSD as well. So you can then, there we go, we got 6 in here. You could then find those images that you've worked on in Photoshop through the Finder as well. So I just really like these tools that Lightroom gives you. And one more shout out for this. I needed to go find a picture from June of 2015 last night. And for some reason in my master catalog, June is a little funky and I don't have folders for that stuff. It's not listed there, but I came up here and I said, show me the date. And, you know, this is my catalog for just 2018. Oh, it's got 44 images from 1904, it thinks, and some other ones. But I just simply drilled down and said, hey, 2018, June, and found them. This is, again, the current catalog, so it doesn't have 2015 in it for real. But I just really, really like how easy Lightroom makes to find those things. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, or Roy says PSB in cases of panos, but yeah, I haven't worked with that. Okay. Anything else to add about that? I think we're good.
I think we're good. I hope that people understand that, you know, for so long, I've been beating this drum that Lightroom and Photoshop are wonderful complementary products. Otherwise, why would one company put both out? Yeah. They're meant to work together, and they do work together well. That's not to say that if you got your start in Photoshop and that's where you want to live and spend all your time, that that's a bad thing. But Lightroom, like you were just showing, when you go into the metadata and you can find whatever you want, the other day, Toby asked me for a bunch of pictures that I took with the 14-24 Sigma lens on our trip that I forgot to send to him. And within 10 minutes, I just got on Lightroom and I sorted by Sigma 14-24, and boom, 135 pictures popped up, exported them out, sent them the raw files, and we're good to go. It's such a powerful tool. Now, you try to do that on your own in your file system or through anything that Photoshop gives you, and it just breaks down. So, yeah, I think timing wise, I'm spending a lot more time in Photoshop now as my photography is advanced, because there's just more that I'm learning that I can do with photographs that Photoshop is great for, or it does it cleaner. And there's some finishing techniques that I like to use that only Photoshop can do. But, you know, they're just wonderful complementary products. And it's a really valid question from Brian. So I'm glad that he brought that up. I've just, like I said, I've personally found that if I can do everything that I can do in Lightroom and then pull it into Photoshop, it just seems to work very efficiently for me. And I don't, you know, I have a hard time keeping everything straight. So it kind of compartmentalizes things. And that's good for me.
Sounds good. All right, let's move on to a couple of news stories. And
going on right now, isn't there?
Well, yeah, there's a bit of news. First off, I'll just spend a minute on this. So Sony announced yesterday the RX 100/6 Mark 6. This is their little pocket camera. I haven't talked about it, I think, since the Mark III or the Mark IV. Just because there hasn't been a lot of changes to it. But this is a truly small pocketable camera. And what they've done with the 6 is impressive. It has a range from 24 to 200 in a little pocketable camera. Plus, it's got IAF. Downside, it's $1,200 for a point-and-shoot pocketable camera. So, you know...
how big is that sensor in that thing? I read the headline for it, but
it's a 1-inch. It's a 1-inch sensor. It's quite good, you know. And I was really impressed when I've shot with the earlier models, the 3. You can get some nice depth of field. You get close into the subject. It's beautiful. It shoots full RAW. It shoots 4K video. But they have sacrificed to get this crazy zoom in. They have sacrificed the aperture range. It's not nearly as fast a lens now. I think it went from something like starting with an f1.8 to f2.8, where it was basically a 24 to 70 before, and now it's 24 to 200. It goes from f2.8 to f4.5, and you know, and on a 1-inch, this is a stacked CMOS sensor. You know, I don't know. As Manny Ortiz, he got his hands on an early model. He's a Sony dude, where he's a Sony artisan, and the quality from the camera is impressive. It is impressive, but it's $1,200. I mean, that's a cost of a really nice lens, and for any camera system. I don't know. I mean, on one hand, I haven't been excited about them. I haven't owned them because I feel like, hey, my phone can do basically as good a job as it, and my phone is always with me. I'm not going to pay $800 to $1,000 for a point shoot. But now I think they have done the thing that really differentiates this from a phone, because I don't care how many times you double tap or digital zoom on your phone, you are not going to get anywhere near the quality out at 200 that you are with this pocketable camera. So
yeah, the other thing that was impressive from it, and I didn't look into the face detection or the eye detection like your A7R III does, but it's got the fastest focusing system currently on the market, I think is what they're touting. But that's pretty cool, because there were tons of focus points. I saw some of the graphics, tons of focus points. Grab yours and focus on it very, very quickly, which that could be pretty cool, especially with street photography and stuff like that. That could be just awesome. It's an impressive camera, and that range is great. I mean, that would have been like the perfect little take around camera on the Vietnam trip.
Yeah.
For some of the street photography that we were doing. But yeah, I mean, $1,200 for a point and shoot is a lot of money. I mean, you're getting into, you can afford some really good mirrorless or DSLRs at that price point.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's again, it's apples and oranges. I get that, but yeah, I'm pretty impressed with my cell phone pictures as well. If I'm talking about a small sensor.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really is, if you want to travel incredibly light and still have some zoom, there is nothing else that comes close to this. Brian asked, what's the benefit of the stacked CMOS sensor? There's a couple of benefits. One is faster readout, so that you get less rolling shutter when you're shooting video and things like that. Another is better low light capabilities, because you have some of the processing sitting right on the backside of the sensor, and it's not in the sensor as much, and so not as much room. I'm kind of talking out of my butt, but that's what I remember from the presentations I've seen. It's better low light performance, faster readout. So, you know, I have no doubt, and from the examples I've seen, it backs it up, that it is an excellent sensor and it's going to do really, really well. But at $1,200 for me, as somebody who's, you know, either got their phone with them and or probably always has a pretty serious camera with me, it just doesn't make sense. But for somebody who wants to travel super light and small, it's not bad.
Yeah, there's some discussion I see about whether or not it's weather resistant, and I don't know. I haven't read up on that.
Yeah,
there's a couple arguments there. I mean, I understand that if you're putting something in and out of your pocket, you're worried about dust and lint and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you can put it in and out of your pocket. So you step out in this crazy weather, and you can just kind of stash it away in your coat pocket and then take it out real quickly and shoot. And I mean, how weather sealed does it really need to be? I've been out with our equipment on these tours for hours, literally hours, in crazy freezing weather or pouring down rain with no cover or anything. And it's pretty incredible. The weather sealing that goes on with these pro cameras. And I think with these little point and shoots, if you can just quickly pull it out of your pocket and take your picture and stick it back in there, I don't know if it would be that big of a concern.
Yeah. I agree with you, Steve, and I'm pretty sure not very weather sealed. Also, just to make sure, I need to say hello to Angela, because I saw her in the chat room a little while ago. I hope she's still around. I just want to read this headline and see a show of hands from chat room and from you, Steve. Did you see this article yet? This is what happens when you attach a 70 to 200 millimeter Canon lens to a Nintendo Game Boy.
I did not see that. I saw it on the Mishmash notes here when I printed it off, and I wanted to ask you about that. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Oh, I only wanted to bring it up because I've seen it everywhere in the past like 4 days. It's like the media, the photo news media has gone kind of crazy with it. And I even had a couple people randomly send it to me, and I was like, "What do you think?" It's like, really? What do I think about this? It's a fun, silly kind of proof of concept art, crafty project. What else do we want to say about it? Somebody attached. Well, what they did is they made a 3D printed model of a Canon lens mount and kind of glued that to the front of their Game Boy and then screwed a 70 to 200 f4 into it. So I guess it's neat that they were capable of making an actual mount that you could attach a lens to. But the fact that it's on a Game Boy that gives you Game Boy like pictures is just, yeah. There you go, Steve. Yeah. Jolena wants to know which Game Boy. I don't know. I'm not going to click the link. I'm not going to give these people any more traffic. They've gotten enough about this.
It's fun. This dates me a bit, but I saw that and I'm like, what, is there a camera on a Game Boy? I mean, I remember my memory of the Game Boy is that monochrome screen with like Tetris. Was that a Game Boy?
Yep.
I know there's like they flip open and stuff now, but I don't know anything about them.
Yeah. I think this is an older and they were black and white only. So it might be that. I've been out at places. Aquarium, I think, is where I remember seeing this, but I've definitely seen it more than once. And kids, not mine, had Game Boys that they were using to capture pictures as they walked around. So, you know, that's kind of neat as a first camera. But, you know, I don't know what else to say about it. Brian says it's better than knitting. Well, I don't know. You knit me a nice scarf, I'm going to be excited. You show me this, I'm going to be like, okay.
Yeah, I got to credit the effort, I suppose. You know, I mean,
yeah,
this will be the kid that like invents the newest sensor for some camera in about 15 years from now.
Yeah,
So
it's true. That's true. Let's move from the unpractical to the practical. We won't deep dive into this article, but and all of these show notes, Roy collects a nice group of news articles, some of us to poke fun at, some of us to share with you in useful ways. And you can find them all at photorec.tv/MMH. That stands for Mish Mash Highlights. This one, business tips, how to steer clients to choose the most profitable package. And a couple of points I want to make, and then Steve, check in with you, because I think you had a really unique and smart pricing for your real estate photography. It says here that the author says it's natural to create options that contain an equal value to the client at varying price points, but in actuality, that makes it more difficult for the client to choose. The more brain power they have to use to make their decision, the less likely you are to get the sale at all. If you craft one package that contains the best value, and if that package also happens to have the best profit margin, you're doing it right. So Steve, tell us a little, if you're all right, Sharon, tell us a little bit about your pricing for real estate.
Yeah, so I told this story before, but when I first entered a new market, so I had started my real estate business in Chicago, and then I moved to Santa Barbara, and those images that I had from Chicago did not translate into selling myself as a photographer for Santa Barbara real estate. I mean, it was a totally different market. So I came up with this whole pricing structure, and it was like $150 for your first shoot. And then I'd go up to, I think my standard pricing at the time was $399 for a home. But then I had, if I have to travel more than 30 miles, it's another $60. If I have to come back for a twilight shoot, that's another $150. And if you get more than 10 images, there's so much each. And it was this big complicated thing. And I went out there, and business just wasn't really coming in as a result. Or if it was, people were just buying the minimal package of 10 images and just around home. And then they didn't want the twilight shot and things like that. And it just drove me bonkers, because my job, I saw it as my job was to help them sell the property and to show that property in the best light possible. So I went back to the drawing board, and I just did a flat rate. And I went out there and I marketed myself. And, when people are charging $1,500, $2,000 to shoot a mansion in Montecito or Santa Barbara, and I come in at $499 flat rate, I don't care how big or how small your place is, you'll get your twilight shot. I don't, I think I extended my range to about 100 miles or something. It was pretty wide. And the phone just started ringing. Once I had a couple clients that were happy with it, they told others, and then it just became a referral business. So it definitely worked for me to just simplify my offering. And for me, it was great, because I knew that I was giving them the best product possible, something I was very proud to put my name on. And there was a lot of great things that came out of that. Extra business, but I also, some of the images were featured on real estate covers, magazines that went out in the local community. They would have my picture on there. That probably would not have happened in my older complex model, where I upcharged for everything. So that's kind of the real estate journey. On my fine art stuff that I'm starting to sell again, I'm finding that I need to go back to this simplification model as well, because I've got a lot of different options available, whether it's canvas and different types of canvas, metal and different mats of metal, certain types of paper, you name it. It just becomes ridiculous for the client. So I'm figuring out the best way that I want to show a piece, and then I'm just going to offer it in like 3 options. You can do high-end paper, you can do metal, or you can do a specific type of canvas if that image works for it. And that's it. That's all I'll offer.
Yeah. Keeping it simple. So I think, what you said is just kind of reinforces this article, the idea of really don't make I do this a lot, and still sometimes just give people too many options, and then they end up not choosing and going off someplace else. I do that a lot in recommending gear. And so I really started to just kind of narrow it down and say, this is the best, and here's, a secondary option if budget is a real concern, or if weight is a real concern, depending on what we're talking about and what they're asking. And for packages, keeping it simple, making it simple for your client. Go ahead.
For those of you who are familiar with In-N-Out Burger, which I miss so much having moved away from California. Gosh, I love In-N-Out Burger. Anyway, they have the simplest menu on the planet, and they're hugely successful. I think the last change they made to their menu was adding Dr. Pepper to it back in the 80s or something. And in all years, it's just been hamburgers, different types of hamburger, French fries, and certain drink orders and milkshakes. And people love going to In-N-Out Burger. It's simple. They know what they want, a number 2 double or the lemonade or something, and you're just out. And you see the lines out the door. And then you've got companies, I mean, McDonald's obviously is hugely successful, but they're constantly playing around with different menu items and then, testing this and testing that. And every time I walk into a restaurant like that, I just don't even know what I'm looking at. So yeah, there's huge power in simplifying your offerings, and let your client use their brain or their time or whatever to connect with you. Your photographs get them in the door. They get the call across your desk. After that, they're just buying you. So give them something simple that they understand, and then spend your time building rapport so that can turn into future business through referrals.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Except I don't miss In-N-Out. All right. Hey, so Canon's has patented a new lens mount. Steve, have you seen this?
And I'm really ticked off about it.
Why are you ticked off about it?
Well, because they've been talking about, it's all speculation at this point, but they've been talking about coming out with a professional mirrorless camera for years now, a full frame mirrorless camera. They're way behind on this whole thing. But I think the key to having that be a success is to launch it with an EF mount, so that people with current Canon glass like myself, I would just jump at the chance to move to that mirrorless level with Canon and stay in their ecosystem. And if they're going to come out with a new mount and then adapters and stuff like that, it's just, and I get it, they probably will come out with lenses that are smaller and better for travel and stuff, but you're talking about huge investments in new lenses and that type of stuff. So I don't know. It's just like, at this point, Canon, don't you get it? And again, it's speculation. This may not go anywhere. Maybe they will come out with a full frame mirrorless with an EF lens mount. But people have been screaming for that for years now. You read all the wish lists of what pro photographers want in a mirrorless from Canon, and that's one of the first things they all say: EF mount.
Yeah. So this looks probably to be for a mirrorless camera coming up. It looks somewhere between an EF and the EF-M mount. I wish I didn't bring it in here. I have the Canon EOS M50 right now, reviewing. That is their, let's call it top of the line mirrorless. Top of the line, because it's not that impressive, but it's a very nice little camera. And I will say it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth connectivity. Last night I put it on a rock and wanted to take some nice pictures as the sun was setting. Oh man, it just works so well, and got that nice Canon interface that just isn't beat by anybody. But I was supposed to get along with it that stupid little adapter that would let me use my Canon lenses on it. Well, that adapter's back ordered. So then I go on Amazon and see, well, I can order it and buy it for the purpose of the review and then sell it afterwards. It's on Amazon for like $200 and some odd. So what we're looking at here when we're talking about this amount is, oh, thanks. Yeah, delivery. The little EOS M50. Here it is. So Archie can stay in here. It's fine. We're running a pro show. Dog can stay. So we've got this mount this is an APS-C size sensor in there. So, APS-C lenses like this should just fit right on it. Nope, you need an adapter. And a full frame adapter, then yeah, Steve, I agree. I share your frustration in that it's, why not just go Sony then, who has just, bam, they got this stuff down. They got these sensors. There's very little reason I think they're going to shoot themselves in the foot if they have clunky adapters working here.
Yeah, I think, quite honestly, all Sony has to do, in my opinion, at this point, is just simplify their interface to be more Canon-like. And they're going that direction. I know the A7R3 is hugely improved over the A7R2, and the A9 is improved over the A7R2. But the touch screen, like Canon's interface is just awesome. When they get it right, they really get things right. But the one thing that Canon does that just drives me crazy, and I'm not just down on Canon here. I'm frustrated because I love Canon and I will always shoot Canon. I mean, I've taken this other step into the medium format world, but putting that aside, all of my full frame stuff will continue to be Canon. I was getting really excited about a full frame mirrorless, and to an extent I still am. But if they end up coming out with a lens adapter or a different mount that needs a lens adapter, it just takes a lot of the wind out of my sail.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully they'll do what customers want. But they also have this knack for just introducing way too many products on every single line. I mean, you take it from the Rebel all the way to the 1DX. How many variations of cameras do you need?
Yeah. They've taken the approach to flood the market at the low end, especially, and just so many options. Caleb's wondering, what about the Nikon mirrorless? Hopefully they'll knock it out of the park. We are starting to get some very early rumors about that. They're supposedly going to target the A7 III, so it should use a similar sensor, and target that $2,000 price range. It's going to have features and functions never be sure if we're talking about in Nikon or if we're talking about in cameras in general. But I'll say this: Nikon has no good live view autofocus system. They still use the contrast detect. And
the D850?
Even in the D850. Yeah. So, the live view experience on every Nikon is, in my opinion, subpar. They make fantastic cameras. They've got great sensors in them. The D850 is the best DSLR on the market, no questions asked, I think. But the live view experience in all of these cameras is just kind of crappy. So when you talk about moving to a mirrorless that is solely based on the live view experience, Nikon's got a big gap to jump. And yeah, sure, they're going to have features and functions in this camera that they've never introduced before to have that focusing speed. I'm pretty sure they're capable of doing it, but it'll be really interesting to see how. Rumors are that we'll see this announced shortly before Photokina. So that's in the fall. Is that September or October? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think
I don't remember.
That's when it is. Roy or chat room, can you tell us when Photokina is? So we'll see. We'll see. And then Film 317 asked, is this a brushless gimbal? No, this is a really cheap handheld tripod-y thing that I got somewhere that I put on today, and I've just been holding it. I actually haven't used it on here. My goal is probably to use this camera a little bit as a vlogging camera because, well, another thing that Canon does so well is that flip-out screen. Mm-hmm. Man, just works so well.
They must have that deeply patented or something because, in my opinion, no other flip-out screen on the market comes close. I mean, there's so many complicated versions of that out there.
It's out of reach. The GH5, the Panasonics have, some of them have the flip-out screens that are just as good, in my opinion. But yeah, but Sony needs to do it. Nikon needs to do it. We need to see them in these other cameras as well. I did just.
Is September 25th is when it kicked off.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, yep. I did just realize that my Nikon D3400 that I have here has no articulating screen, and well, I really like that. Okay, moving on.
I still have articulating screen envy, despite this bad boy.
I know. I wish they put articulating screen on there.
I know.
No.
Kind of a bummer, but obviously I got over that.
You did. There is, I'll just say this because a drone is sitting here. There's another video of a dude whose drone is to a lake. It ran out of battery juice as he's flying it home to him. And so he swims out and catches it at the last second. I don't know. I hate to be such a skeptical, cynical person, but the fact that the camera is pointed perfectly from the drone to capture his swim to it and to catch it makes me a little suspicious. And it just, man, when that battery gets low on these drones, it beeps so annoyingly at you. And if I'm anywhere over water, man, I don't go below 45% battery over water. That's my rule. I just made it up, but I followed that rule to this day. And I don't know. How do you let that happen? How do you let your drone get so low in battery over water?
That story is that it's based in New Mexico, and just before the drone photographed him, it was pointed up, getting all the chemtrails up in the sky on camera. So
got it.
And he took his tinfoil hat off before he jumped in the water, apparently.
Good. Yeah, that'll they're heavy. They're heavy. They'll push you under and you'll drown. Last news story we want to hit on is back to Canon. We've got leaked press releases for the new 70-200. We talked about this briefly last week. New 70-200 f4 IS and the new 70-200 f2.8 IS. This will be the Mark III. What do you think, Steve?
Well, okay. So the 70-200 2.8 version 2 with image stabilization is my favorite Canon lens that I own. I love that lens. Every time I shoot it, I absolutely love it. It's built like a tank. It's lasted years, and it's super sharp. It's great. Like, why do you even need to come out with a new one? So I was kind of scratching my brain trying to figure out why. And I'm thinking maybe it could be for, it's not too far away that we're going to end up with cameras that have, we already have 50 is pretty regular, 100 megapixel camera bodies, and, making sure that you've got the kind of glass that can handle these super high megapixel cameras that are coming. That could be one of the reasons. I think they tweaked the aperture blades maybe a little bit. Looks like they put some coating on the front of the lens to help with, I don't know, water spots and stuff like that, not accumulating on the lens. Maybe it's better weather sealing. I was also hoping that maybe it would have been smaller. Maybe they would have been able to kind of engineer it so that it would be shorter, or I don't know. I read up on it briefly, and really not going to go trade out my version 2 for version 3 anytime soon. And it's $800 is the speculation. So now you're getting into those, Nikon started doing it with their 70-200 new entrants too.
Yeah.
I don't know what the price point is on the F4. That one, yeah, I mean, that was a pretty big hit. And I just would have liked to have seen them tweak the engineering so that it was a more compact lens, but I don't know if that's even possible.
Yeah, it's covering that full frame sensor, so I'm not sure. But Roger points out that, Steve, actually you don't own that lens anymore.
I know that's coming. I need to get used to the fact that all this Canon gear is my wife's.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, like, I need to start talking about it in that way, and then I'll really get sad. But.
Yeah. And I think that lens is their bread and butter. It's one of them, and having that be ready for higher megapixels cameras coming, as you mentioned, is good. But man, as Kate wonders, how can they make that lens better? It is fantastic now. The only thing I can think is, yes, okay, maybe as we present, you'll start to see some flaws in the Mark II that you wouldn't see otherwise. But
yeah, it could be. I think that Scott actually brings up a great point. Good to see you in there, Scott. He says, get the Tamron, it's badass. And I agree. I mean, we tested, right, the Tamron G2 compared to my, I don't know, 9-year-old lens, and it held up. I mean, clarity-wise, they were quite similar. And so I think that some of the third-party manufacturers, Sigma, Tamron, they're probably pretty stoked on this version 3 coming out at this $2,800 price point, if that's where it's released, because it just makes a bigger case to buy something like the Tamron G2. And that is, it's a great lens. It drove me nuts to shoot that lens and have the zoom ring up on the front of the lens element. I know if I had enough time, I'd get used to it, but I do remember that just being such a pain.
Yeah. And we didn't shoot. One of the things that I love, and this is where I think you really start to see, and maybe I should make sure I try to incorporate this into lens reviews more often, especially comparisons. From the days of shooting the wedding, you didn't have to worry about which direction you were shooting, into the sun sideways, with the sun behind you. The contrast of that lens remained always fantastic. And you don't always get that in third-party lenses, whereas maybe just looking at the sharpness side by side is good. Colors are often pretty good, pretty close, but the contrast that you see, and that's from the glass elements and the coating of the elements, just really, really good. But yeah, people are going to look $2,800 for, or like $1,200 for something very, very similar. Quick shout out, that Sigma 14 to 24 f2.8, which I have to take back to the FedEx place tonight. That's a fantastic lens. When I started pixel peeping, I was really, really impressed with that lens. It's $1,200. Sony 16 to 35. This effing thing is like $2,400. And yes, it's more travel friendly. It's a little bit more versatile with filters. But
is that the 2.8?
That is the 2.8. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, it's a nice lens, but that Sigma, if you don't mind carrying around more and not being able to use filters, is sharper, and it's half the price. Oh.
I started when you had requested those files I talked about earlier in the show. I went ahead and processed, I don't know, 5 or 6 photographs that I also gave you. And I was going through the editing, and man, I was pretty impressed with that lens. That was awesome. That's the first time I'd shot it or even worked the photos, was yesterday or a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. It's nice. It's really nice and a great value.
Very nice. All right. I think that wraps it up for the news. Real briefly, we move into the section of the show we call micro stock, because Roy and I make a micro amount of money. It started as an experiment, I don't know, over a year ago for me, and getting close to a year for Roy now, of can you make money selling stock photography? I've got a couple hundred. No, I don't have that many. I have like 50 images online or so. And my winner, for those, if you haven't been following this lately, is an isolated owl. That is an owl I cut out from the background. I sell about one of those a day for about 25 cents. So, no.
You isolated a second owl.
Yes.
Has that one caught on?
Nope. It's sold, I think, twice total. I'll share my screen real quick so people can see. And I recently put up the water droplets as kind of abstract to see how they would do. And I think this puts it in order of kind of your most recent biggest sales. So maybe the owl has sold a couple more times since it's put in second place there. I do have 128. I'm at 8 downloads for the month. So my average is at least a download a day. That's like a download and a quarter. So 25 cents a day. Not getting rich anytime soon, but it's an interesting experiment. Part of me, I have got a friend of a friend that does want to buy some fine art, and she's like, "Where can I see all of your pictures?" And I'm like, "Well, I have them all up on the iStock, but I don't want to send you that because you can just buy it for 25 cents." So there is a certain, a definite cheapening of my brand, I feel like, by putting it out there, but it's for experimental purposes. And nobody's bought the candy corn still, in case you were wondering. But maybe this Halloween, bunch of candy corn. Roy has made, since we last talked, 45 more cents. He's up to $63.78. Roy, that's enough for you to buy a coffee in the airport. So there we go.
A coffee in the airport, and maybe in the Icelandic airport.
Yeah. All right, and we move into our last section of the show: photos from space. Bring him in here. He's upside down this time. And this week we have, this is cool. And there's actually, I found this guy's YouTube channel the other day that just talks about different weather phenomenon and uses satellite stuff to talk about it. In March, NOAA launched the GOES 17. This is a satellite that sits up here above the Western Hemisphere and just gives us some beautiful imagery. Look at this picture of Earth. It's really nice. What I don't know, I'm going to guess that this is not one single image, but this is a composite. I don't think the satellite sits that far away to be able to capture the whole Earth in once. But that's a very pretty picture.
That's cool. Looks like an Apple screensaver.
It does look like an Apple screensaver. I wonder how big. Open image in new tab. How big is this image all by itself? That's that big. It could be a desktop background for some monitors. Not for my giant monitor, but hey, close enough. All right. And that brings us to the end of the show. We answered Brian's question in our Lightroom section, and we have wrapped this puppy up. No show next week. I will, unless you want to do it by yourself, Steve.
I'm going to still keep deferring to you. I think people have seen me before when you've gone off camera or something, and I'm like Ricky Bobby without you here. I don't know what to do with my hands, and it's really awkward. So we'll take a rain check on next week. Where are you?
Joshua Tree.
Oh, that's right.
Joshua Tree getting sunburned at night, according to Roy.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. It's so weird when one of us goes on a tour and the other one's not there.
I know.
Kind of right off.
I'll make sure I shoot with a Sigma 14 lots and lots so that you don't, so you're jealous. And we will be back the following week, though, to mostly talk about what we're packing for the Arctic. So we'll be back June 20th, I think, right?
Yeah, I believe that sounds right.
And then we're out of here. And we probably won't be doing any shows from the ship since the data package is like 4 megabytes for $50 or something. Roy, maybe you can loan me some of your iStock money and we can afford our data package. We'll see.
Yeah, they if it's anything like our Antarctica trip, they'll give you like a free email thing to do, and it basically takes your email. You create your own email address on the ship, and I looked and I was trying to see if I could just attach a photo to send my wife, and the photo limit was like 240 kilobytes. is what they'd allow you to attach. So yeah, we're not going to have much on the ship in the Arctic.
Yeah. All right, so we've got good stuff in the chat room. Chat room, thanks so much for joining us. Roger reports that the GOES 17 satellite is sitting 22,000 miles above Earth. Wow, that actually does seem really far. Maybe that is one single shot. 22,000 miles. Whew. All right. And Trelina says, step it up, Steve. You're man enough to do this on your own. And Angela says, shake and bake. Shake and bake. All right. I think on that note, we're going to say sayonara, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks for hanging out with us, chat room. Steve, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Bye-bye.